Morning, good afternoon, good evening, gang. So first and foremost, I have my phone next to me, so if I frantically go and grab it, it's probably because my niece, my 5-year-old niece, is having her first official day of kindergarten today, and she is rather excited about that, so I apologize ahead of time. She did warn me she may call, so just a heads up. Secondly, let's go to this. Boom, your course is where everything you need will be there. So this is what we're doing today, Empire Building in South America, the Incan Empire. What I will be doing in this video is I will be focusing just on the Incan Empire. So that'll be video 1 for this week. Video 2 will be sort of an introduction to what we're doing next week with the indigenous empires in North America. Next week, I'm going to focus on the Iroquois Confederacy and the Powhatan confederacies. Basically, for the second video, I'm just sort of doing a overview of indigenous peoples in North America. It's going to be short. It's going to be not as detailed as if you've ever done an indigenous studies course, but I'm just providing an overview of the people. So that's what we're going to be doing for this week. Next week, indigenous people, focusing on the Iroquois and the Powhatan, which means 3 weeks from Thursday, dun, 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 your annotated bibliography is due. You should hopefully have an idea of what your topic is going to be. You should be going to the library, going to JSTOR, trying to find sources for your topic. Again, I have, thanks to the Campion librarian, we have a number of videos regarding Introduction to Library, Quick Find in JSTOR, and the Chicago Style Guide, as well as the library guide for this particular course. In addition, I have, don't forget, the annotated bibliography assignment itself, as well as guidance for annotated bibliography. There's also instructions for accessing JSTOR if you're not 100% on how to do it. Also, don't forget, at 8:30 to 9:45 Thursday mornings, I will be in our virtual classroom. Click right here, and boom, you can come and talk to me and go, oh my God, I have no idea what I want to write about, and we can figure something out. Or you could just come to talk to me, or if you have any questions about anything, or if you just want human contact, come see me. I will be there drinking my coffee. If that time doesn't work for you, let me know, and we will figure out a time that works for both of us to sit down and have a chat. Or if you're having computer troubles or whatever and Zoom doesn't want to cooperate, just let me know and say, hey, not cooperating, here are my questions, and I can answer them via email. Again, I'm turning into an old person, so if it's after about 9 o'clock, email might be a little slower to respond. All right. Boom, back to me. So let's get started with today's class, today's video. All right, from current slide. There we are. As per normal, there are the key terms and hard words at the beginning of every PowerPoint. These are just the key terms and hard words that we're going to be using for today, so I might refer back to it. These are also the key terms and hard words. Again, I will draw I will learn to speak English, but I will be creating a list for the midterm exam from which I will draw the terms from these key terms and hard words, not just from this PowerPoint, but from the previous PowerPoints as well as obviously the future ones. So just to give you guys an idea, PowerPoint, key terms, hard words, there's going to be 2 of them today, mostly because there are a lot of non-familiar terms, so want to make sure they were up there. So this is what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to talk a little bit about the rise and fall of the Incans. Rise and fall of the Incas, sort of go, hey, this is where they rise. Oh, hey, look, we're top of the world, ma. And then the downfall. We'll be looking after that, focusing more on Incan government, Incan economy, and Incan religion and architecture. Now, who are we talking about when we're talking about the Incas? Well, we're looking again in South America. And just to give you guys an idea of geography again, this is this would be where Tiwanaku is, located on the shores of Lake Titicaca. Let's have the giggles. Come on, there's a 5-year-old in all of us. I mean, you tell my niece, hey, Lake Titicaca, she'll start giggling like this. Here is Chan Chan that we talked about in the last video. And we're going to be focusing on this area right here, Cuzco, C-U-Z-C-O. Now, the Incas, are going to be coming out of southern Peru. Here are the modern borders. Ecuador, up here, Colombia, Brazil, Bolivia, Argentina, Chile. So we're looking at southern Peru. And they are from the city-state, around the city-state of Cusco. Now, initially, the Inca were a small tribe focused, they're in the Andes, so they're focused around llama, similar to Tiwanaku, and agriculture. So, you will have some similar agricultural practices. So, just like Tiwanaku, Cusco will practice suca colas. They will become urbanized, or relatively more so urbanized, with the establishment of Cusco right here in 1197 CE. So we're looking at late 12th century, early 13th century CE. And so they would spend the next 200 years establishing themselves as a power within the region, building up its size, building up its strength relative to others in the area. So looking at this map with the rise of the Incans, so between 1197 and about 1397, 1400 or so, they will expand from this little dot right here, Cusco, to this little sort of reddish zone by about 1400 CE. Now, the one person, the one leader that is going to fundamentally change the kingdom of Cusco into the Incan Empire is Pachacuti. This dude right here, Pachacuti, Pachacuti. Here is a statue of Pachacuti from Cusco in more recent times. But so the Incan leader Pachacuti will reorganize the kingdom of Cusco into the Incan Empire and launch a campaign of expansion starting in 1438. Now, as you can see from this map, we're going from this little sort of red area to this sort of pinkish area right here. So from the shores of Lake Titicaca to pushing into more of the area controlled by Chan Chan. By the way, just want to note another area, another location on this map. Right here we have Cajamarca, Cajamarca. Just want to note that for when we talk about an Incan leader, Atahualpa, that is going to be where he will be captured. So just to give you guys a little preview. But back to Pachacuti. Now, Pachacuti would conquer his neighbors with a combination of guile and force. He'll brains and brawn, effectively. Now, what he would do is he would have Incan spies sent into neighboring kingdoms, where the spies would report back to Pachacuti on the political status or the economic status of the kingdom, as well as its military status. So what were the armies like? What was the political structure like? Is their economy in a good shape? What's happening? And at the same time, these spies would work at spreading propaganda regarding life under Incan rule. They would be going out to the people and going, I've heard really good things about this guy Pachacuti. I've heard really good things about the Incan people. I mean, our neighbor down the road. Yeah, they went over to the Incans and they're having a great life. They're getting lots of food. The Incans are treating them great. I mean, it would be wonderful, wonderful to live life under the Incans. And they would start with this propaganda campaign, trying to sort of undermine the leadership within the neighboring kingdom that Pachacuti wanted to conquer. And once the groundwork is laid, once Pachacuti had a lay of the land, once he had an idea of what's going on, then he would start the soft sell. He would send emissaries to the kingdom that he wants to conquer. And he would, with these emissaries, with these messengers, he would also send a variety of luxury goods. He would send tapestries. He would send pottery. He would send luxury goods to help show the leaders of the area he wants to conquer that it would be economically beneficial for them to join the Incan Empire as subjects. That is, hey, join us, become part of our empire, and you too can have access to all these luxury goods. And if the kingdom decided, no, we want to stay independent, we want to be our own kingdom, if they chose the hard way, then there would always be the Incan army there to convince them. The messengers would go, oh, okay, you don't want to be part of us peacefully? Well, if you look outside your walls there, you can see the 100,000 men that's sitting waiting to take over your kingdom by force. So what do you want to do? Do you want to join us willingly, or do you want us to kind of walk in? And if we have to walk in, Pachacuti will not be happy. And so many of the kingdoms around Cusco, in this purple area here, would choose the better part of valor. This would be the part where they would ostensibly continue to control their kingdom as part of the Incan bureaucracy, and they would join the Incan Empire willingly. And so what would happen with these conquered kingdoms is the children of the conquered leaders would often be sent to Cusco. They would be taught the Incan way of administration, the Incan way of leadership. They would become somewhat indoctrinated into sympathizing with the Incans. And then when they come of age, they would be sent back home to administer their former home, their former kingdom. For those of you who have either read A Song of Fire and Ice by George R.R. Martin or seen the series Game of Thrones, there we go. Think of it as the same role played by Theon Greyjoy with the Starks. So you have a rebellion against the Starks, and the Starks go and put down the rebellion, and to ensure that the Iron Isles, remain subservient, they take Theon Greyjoy, the last of the leaders, the last of the leader's sons, back to Winterfell to be a foster son of the Starks. And by growing up with the Starks, the idea was, hey, these Starks aren't that bad. Yes, I like them. Yes, I can become part of them. Their rule is good. And then the idea with Greyjoy would be sent back to rule the Iron Isles as part of the Kingdom of the North. So that's effectively what the Incans under Pachacuti are doing. They're going to take the children of the conquered kingdoms, bring them back to Cusco, and indoctrinate them, teach them the Incan ways, teach them or create sympathy for the Incans, and then sent back home. Now, the greatest area of, I was messing with my mouse, I apologize. The greatest area of expansion would be in 1471, when the Incans militarily defeat the kingdom of Timor. So here we go. So they conquer this area in the darker brown. Chan Chan gets taken shortly thereafter. And between 1471 and 1493, the rest of the kingdom of Timor is incorporated into the Incan Empire. So that is under Tupac Inca, and I've done a lot of research about this. I've gone online, I've talked to some friends, and as near as I can tell, Tupac Inca did not have any beef with Biggie. I'll wait for the laughter to die down. What can I say? I have really bad jokes. So what this meant was that the Incan reach would stretch from Ecuador and parts of Colombia in the north to Chile and parts of Argentina in the south. This would be done under Juana Capac, 1493 to 1525. That date's going to be kind of important in a little bit. So basically, by 1525, the Incan Empire would basically control parts of Bolivia, parts of Argentina, parts of Chile, as well as large parts of Peru, Ecuador, and a little bit of Colombia. The next big clash for the Incans would be the introduction of the Spanish in the area in 1526, which is why the year 1525 kind of important. So let's introduce the Spanish. Let's bring the Spanish into things. So in 1526, a conquistador by the name of Francisco Pizarro. Here we are, Francisco Pizarro, Pizarro. Oh, while I'm here, these two next names are going to be important too. So Pizarro is going to be the Spaniard. Then we're going to have Huáscar, and then we're going to have Atahualpa. These are going to be the two Incan leaders that are going to be in charge of, be involved with the Incan Empire after the death of Juana Capac in 1525. Cool. I'll just move my face a little north. Atahualpa, Huáscar. So 1526, Francisco Pizarro leads a contingent of conquistadors on an expedition south of Panama. So there we are, coming from Panama. I have references from the 80s and 90s. I go all throughout the decades. So they come from, started an expedition from Panama, and basically heading on south. When he first comes into contact with the Incan Empire. Now Pizarro recognizes the potential for him. He recognizes the potential for fame and glory within Spanish society. So Pizarro has this sort of first contact and then returns to Spain to petition the queen, petition the king for the authority to lead an expedition against the Incan Empire. Goes back to Spain, goes, my queen, please let me have a contingent of men to come conquer this large area full of gold, full of silver. It will bring glory and it will bring money and fame to the Spanish Empire. Oh, and to myself as well. Please, oh queen, let me send a expedition against this large empire. And so in 1532, Pizarro returns with the Spanish queen's authority as, quote, governor and captain of all conquests in Peru. So basically, the Queen of Spain gave Pizarro the authority that whatever you take, whatever you capture, whatever you conquer, you will be the governor, you will be the captain of whatever territory you take over. And when he returns in 1532, Pizarro finds an empire that was weakened not only by disease, but racked by civil war. Because smallpox was introduced by the Spanish in their earlier incursion, their earlier contact. Smallpox was transferred from the Spaniards to the Incans, and basically smallpox flared throughout the entirety of the Incan Empire. And as well, because of this smallpox epidemic, between 1529 and 1532, the Incan Empire underwent a succession crisis because our buddy Huayna Capac, who basically conquered this area in the south, he dies in 1529 due to smallpox. And what ends up happening is, I'll talk a little bit more about this when we talk about the dynastic cycle, the dynastic leadership of the Incans. But what ends up happening is he ends up dividing the empire between two of his sons. Atahualpa is basically given the northern part, and Huascar is given the southern part. And they are half brothers, same dad, different mom. And the two half brothers, Huascar and Atahualpa, well, they both claimed leadership after the death of their father, and both of them marshaled large armies. Huascar was named ruler. He was the elder son, so he was basically named ruler of the Incan Empire, although he was given direct control of the southern area. And his younger brother Atahualpa was appointed governor in the northern area. Now Huascar was kind of afraid, kind of a little paranoid that Atahualpa would lead a coup d'état. COUP space D apostrophe ETAT. That's effectively a military uprising against his leadership. So Huascar was afraid that Atahualpa would lead a military revolution, a coup d'état, an overthrow of the state from the north. Again, Huascar was just a little bit paranoid. So before he could do so, before Atahualpa could do anything, and he was up north just happy. Yeah, I'm governor, dude. I'm fine down here. I'm fine up here. Yeah, I'll do whatever you want. Huascar declared Atahualpa a traitor and attacked him from the south. And again, I'll talk more about the Civil War when we get to the dynastic, the dynastic rule of the Incans. But by the time Pizarro returned to initiate his conquest of the Incans in 1532, Atahualpa had defeated his brother, Huascar. And so it was Atahualpa who was in control of the Incan Empire. And so Atahualpa met Pizarro's envoy and set up a meeting for Atahualpa and Pizarro in the city of Cajamarca, Cajamarca. And so what ends up happening is there is a meeting of the meeting between the Spaniards and the Incans in Cajamarca. And the Spaniards, even though this was supposed to be a peaceful meeting, they came armed. They were secretly armed. And what ends up happening is a Spanish priest comes before Atahualpa and offers him a Bible. And so Atahualpa, I almost said Atahualpa takes the book, but he does not physically take the book, but a servant brings the book to him, has the book opened, and it's flipped through, and then it's tossed to the ground. Now, we're not sure whether this was intended or not, but this presented an opportunity to the Spanish. Oh my God, this heathen Atahualpa threw the Bible to the ground. Oh my God, we must react. And so the Spaniards showed their arms and started attacking the Incans, who came relatively unarmed. And so whether it was intended or not, Pizarro used this opportunity to seize Atahualpa and hold him for ransom. And so he sent a messenger to the Incan leadership, saying, "Hey, we have your emperor. If you want him back, you have to provide us ransom." And so there was a ransom room set up, located in Cajamarca, Peru. It was about, I'll give you the dimensions. So it's about 6.7 meters by 6.7 meters long, 5.2 meters wide, and 2.4 meters tall. And Atahualpa was required, the Incans were required to fill that space. 630. What is that? It's about, pesky math. 630, 60. It's about 60 cubic meters, if I'm doing that right. Over 60 cubic meters of space that Atahualpa and the Incans were required to fill, one time with gold and 2 times with silver, before they would even think about releasing Atahualpa. And the Incans provided the ransom. They filled that space once with gold and then twice with silver. But the Spaniards kept Atahualpa hostage before installing his younger half-brother. A lot of brothers with one Capac. As a puppet king, as a king controlled by the Spaniards. And so Atahualpa was executed under dubious Spanish charges, in August 1533 by garrote. Basically, if you've ever seen any mafia movies, the piano wire comes behind, goes. Now, after this, there will be Incan resistance to Spanish rule, including by the king that the Spaniards put on the throne, for the next 40 years, until the Spaniards will capture the last of the Incan strongholds and execute the last of the Incan imperial line in 1572. So between 1533 and 1572, there will be a low-scale guerrilla war by the Incans against the Spanish. So again, that's sort of the rise and the fall of the Incan Empire. So let's look at, I apologize, I should have had this slide here. So now we're going to look at the Incan government. But before we look at the Incan government, let's sort of set up what the social structure looks like. So the Incan Empire had sort of a 5-step pyramid social structure. At the very, very, very tippy top, we have the emperor and his royal family. Simple, straightforward. I mean, it's good to be the king, good to be the emperor. Step below, we have the high priest. It's only a 2-person second step. The high priest and the commander of the army. That's the next step, next rung on this social structure. On the rung below that, we have the professional military, because the Incan Empire had both a conscripted army, a drafted army, as well as a professional soldiery, a professional military. So they would be at that 3rd level, along with official priests and the administrators and the bureaucrats. So the children, the leaders that of conquered territory would be at this level. The level below, the fourth level, would be the merchants, the artisans, what we would consider today a middle class. And at the bottom, we would have the farmers, the peasants. That's what I kind of mean by the conscripts. We'll talk a little bit more about that when we talk about the Incan economy. And a group called sorcerers. Now, the sorcerers are not official priests. A good way to describe them would be local healers, local medicine men, not officially following one of the gods, but still in a position to help the local community. Now, I'll get to this in a second. Now, the Incan Empire was ruled by a centralized monarchy based out of Cusco. The Incan dynasty, that is the emperor and the royal family, ruled by divine right, arguing that their right to rule was divinely ordained. The top god basically said, "Yep, you get to rule," which meant the Incan emperor was not only the head of the secular state, not only the head of the Incan Empire, but also ruled as the head of the state religion. The Incan emperors argued that they were descended from Inti, I-N-T-I. That is the sun god and the patron god of the Inca. And therefore, the emperors were the sons, S-O-N-S, of the sun, S-U-N. Because if they're descended from the sun god, S-U-N god, they're the sons, S-O-N, of the sun. The Incan people and those they ruled were therefore referred to as children of the sun. Now, we're going to talk about the administration of the Incan Empire. Because when Pachacuti embarked on his campaign of expansion and fundamentally transformed the kingdom of Cusco into the Incan Empire, he will fundamentally change the nature of the Incan state, going from the kingdom of Cusco to the Incan Empire. And what Pachacuti did was he separated the Incan Empire into four administrative quadrants known as Suyu, S-U-Y-U. We have Chinchan or Chinche Suyu, that would be the northwest. We have Anti-Suyu, that would be the northeast. We have Kuntin Suyu or Kunti Suyu, the southwest. And then we would have Kola Suyu or Kula Suyu in the southeast. And a corner, if you can kind of tell from this map, but a corner of each Suyu met at Cusco. There we go, Cusco Square. A corner of each Suyu met at Cusco with the city tying the entire empire together. So the city of Cusco would be the center of the empire. So at the top we have the Suyu. And each Suyu was ruled by an Apu. No relation to the guy who runs Quickie Mart. An Apu was a venerated elder who previously ruled a larger city-state within that Suyu. So, for example, an Apu could come from, I'll go to a different map, better map. There we go. So, an Apu for Chinche Suyu or Chinchan Suyu could have formerly ruled Quito, for example, or could have formerly ruled Chan Chan, or could have formerly ruled Cajamarca. So an Apu is a venerated elder who previously ruled a larger city-state within that Suyu. Pardon me. Now, going down a level, each Suyu was further separated into Wamani, or provinces, that were governed by a Tokrikrok. A Tokrikrok is effectively a governor. And each Wamani, each province, was further separated into Seiya, which were often areas based along tribal lines, and these would be led by the conquered nobility. Each Suyu, each Wamani, each Suyu, and each province would have ethnic Incans in position of powers. That is, the Apu, the venerated elder, and the Tukrikrok, the governor, would both be Incan. The leader of the Seiya would be the former nobility of the conquered land. And as I previously mentioned, these former leaders, these members of the conquered nobility, would have their children sent to Cusco, where they would be indoctrinated into Incan society and the Incan way of life. To put it in our terms, if we treated the three countries of North America, that is Canada, US, and Mexico, as one entity to the Incan Empire, our Suyu would be Canada, led by our Apu, Justin Trudeau. So our Suyu, our administrative quadrant, if we're looking at Canada, US, Mexico as part of one entity, similar to the Incan Empire, our Suyu would be Canada, led by our Apu, Justin Trudeau, pardon me. Our Wamani, our province, would be Saskatchewan, led by our Tokrikrok, our governor, Scott Moe. And our Seiya would be Regina, led by our choice of conquered nobility, Michael Fougere. Although, let's be honest, these names could change in the next couple months because we have, I believe, a mayoral election, a provincial election for sure. This is we're in September 2020. For those of you watching in the future, woo, future! So these we have a mayoral election, we have a provincial election, and depending on the if there is a vote of non-confidence, we may have a federal election as well. So just to give you guys sort of an analogy of the breakdown of Suyu to Wamani to Seiya. Now, the Incan emperor was assisted in policy by a viceroy or a prime minister known as an Incap Rantin. And this is part of the reason why I have 2 pages of key terms and hard words. So we have a viceroy or a prime minister known as the Incap Rantin, INKAP space RANTIN. There was also a council of the realm in which each Suyu, each administrative quadrant, would send members of their ruling elite to act as representatives. And this council of the realm would have 16 members, including the 17, 18 members if we include the viceroy and the emperor himself. So 4 quadrants, 16 members, and you'd be going, okay, that makes sense. That's easy. We're going to have 4 members each. Yeah, that makes sense. Nope. Cusco, as the capital, would be entitled to 4 members of the council. So Cusco, as capital, would be 4 members would make up 4 members of the council, and really the emperor controlled Cusco, so the emperor controlled those 4 representatives. Then the next 2 largest Suyus, Chinchen or Chinche Suyu and Kola Suyu, would each send 4 members themselves. So Cusco would have 4 members, Chinche Suyu would have 4 members, Kola Suyu would have 4 members, and then the 2 smaller Suyu, Anti Suyu and Kunchin Suyu, would each send 2 members. So the emperor would always have pretty much 25% of the representation in his back pocket. And the viceroy and the council of the realm would advise the emperor on economic and military matters throughout the empire. Normally at this point I would ask if there's any questions about that, but hopefully if you're not sure, you can rewind and rewatch it. If you're further not sure, feel free to email me or come see me during my office hours if you want some clarification or if you need clarification on the Incans. So as promised, let's get back to the Civil War. Because dynastically, the emperor would designate his heir before his death. So there would be an emperor, and then there would be an emperor in waiting. A designated person, if something happened to the emperor, boom, he would become the next emperor. This was most often, but not always, the eldest son. And so with respect to the Incan Civil War, as I alluded to previously, the cause of the war was this dynastic split. So what ends up happening is smallpox starts going all throughout the Incan Empire. And the father, Wana Capac, had a designated heir. He had his eldest son as a designated heir. And what ends up happening is smallpox. Smallpox takes out the designated heir at the same time as smallpox is affecting Wana Capac, the dad. And so he hears about the death of his eldest son, and he is on his deathbed, and he cannot decide between his other 2 sons, Atahualpa and Huascar. So he designated Atahualpa as governor and heir to the northern part of the empire, and Huascar as heir to the southern part. In essence, Huascar becomes the emperor, Huascar becomes the emperor, Atahualpa becomes the emperor in waiting. And so the Civil War happens. Atahualpa he's a nicer guy. He's able to convince some of the better soldiers, some of the better generals to follow him, and they take out Huascar. Now there was a third brother, third-ish brother, third legitimate brother, I should say, Tupac Hualpa. Tupac, T-U-P-A-C, pour one out for him. Hualpa, H-U-A-L-L-P-A. And he was the one that would be crowned emperor by the Spanish. Unfortunately for the Spanish, he was crowned in 1533. Unfortunately for the Spanish, he dies of smallpox in 1533. Well, Tupac Hualpa would have 4 children, a son and 3 daughters, all of whom, the 3 daughters, would marry conquistadors, would marry into the Spanish. And so Tupac Hualpa was not followed by his son, but was rather followed by an illegitimate brother of the previous 3 brothers. Go back here for a second. No, I thought I had his name. No need to remember his name. But an illegitimate brother of the previous 3 brothers, Atahualpa, Huascar, and Tupac, would basically take the mantle of leadership of the Incan Empire. And initially he would work with the Spanish before becoming disenchanted with them. It's like, look, I'm leading this empire, but you're doing all the work. I mean, no, I'm supposed to be doing everything. And so in 1535, this illegitimate brother starts a guerrilla war against the Spanish, trying to kick the Spanish out until his death in 1544. And this war would continue against the Spanish under his successors until the death of the last of the Incan empires, Tupac Amaru, Amaru, in 1572. Tupac Amaru would be captured in 1572 as he and his wife were running away, were trying to escape from the Spanish when she gave birth. Tupac was given a kangaroo trial. It was a kangaroo court. Basically, the charges were trumped up, and he was basically guilty before he even came before the court, and sentenced to beheading. The remainder of the Incan royal family were dispersed. They were exiled among Spain's growing colonial possessions. So basically, by 1572, that's going to be it pretty much for the Incan guerrilla war against the Spaniards. So politically, Pachacuti will fundamentally change the kingdom of Cusco into the Incan Empire. He will set up these administrative sections. The Suyu, governed by an Apu, the Wamani, governed by a Tokrikok, and the Saya, led by the conquered nobility. And dynastically, the rule would go from father to son. Although it was not always the eldest son, it was up to the emperor to designate his successor. So that's the Incan government. The next important thing I want to talk about is the Incan economy. Because similar to the other American empires we discussed, the Incans will operate on a tributary system. And so this would be an empire-wide tax system, and I'm going to go back to the administrative sections for a second. This would be an empire-wide tax system based on a tribute system in which tribute would be paid to the leaders of the Saya. So you would have your typical, right under the Saya, you would have everybody else, your typical Incan. And they would pay tribute to the Saya, led by the conquered nobility. The various Saya, so the Saya of Regina, Saya of Musja, Saya of go to the map, Saya of Larange, Saya of Lloydminster, they would pay their tribute to the Wamani, pay their tribute to the governor. Then the governors would ensure that that tribute would be paid to the Suyu, and then the Suyu would ensure that the Apu would ensure that that tribute would be paid to the Incan Empire. Hopefully that makes sense. So tribute goes from the bottom to the top. Now with tribute, we're not talking about money and precious metals when we talk about taxation, when we talk about tribute with the Incans. We're not talking money. We're not talking precious metals. What we're talking about is a system based on taxation in kind. Taxation in kind. Taxation, spelled like taxation, -in-kind. That is, the tax or the tribute would be paid through either goods such as textiles, or more often in services such as physical labor. More often than not, the leaders of the various levels of government, the Saya, the Wamani, the Suyu, would be responsible for organizing corvée labor, that is C-O-R-V-E accent aigu, E, labor, forced labor, so to speak. Drafted labor, that's a better way to say it. But the various levels of government would be responsible for organizing this labor to help produce public works projects, such as roads and aqueducts, as well as this labor force being used as the basic military unit in the Incan Empire. So going back, there we are. Going back to this, the 5-step social structure. I talked about the conscripts. These would be basically your mass of people, the peasants, who would form the basic military unit of the Incan Empire, led by the professional military. And so what would happen is, if in times of military crisis, let's say with the Spaniards coming, the Saya would organize small groups of conscripts, draftees, send them to the province. The province would further organize these groups of draftees, send them to the Suyu. The Suyu would further organize these draftees, lead them with professional military against whichever outside force they need to defend against. Now, this system of conscripted labor, the system of drafted labor, is referred to as the MITA system, MIT apostrophe A. And I'm emphasizing this because the Spaniards in South America are going to use a similar system without the apostrophe, MITA, and the systems are different. Similar name, but they're used in a different manner. So for the Incans, all men between the ages of 15 and 50 were required to participate in this system of forced labor. A family would have a little over 2 months off of the forced labor, during which time they would plant and tend to their crops. The rest of the time would be devoted to mita. So all men between the ages of 15 and 50, basically for 10 months out of the year, worked for the Incan Empire. And during the time that the men were away on mita, outside of the 2 months that they would go home, plant their crops, tend to their families. During the time that the men were away on mita, their family would be taken care of through communal provisions. So each family within the community would provide some food and some goods to allow the family whose men are working to continue to survive. And so what each community did is they had a sort of staggered system, because I mean, you don't want a community completely devoid of all men between the ages of 15 and 50. That would put a lot of pressure on the community. So what you would have is you would sort of have a staggered system, so that only a portion of the community would be gone at the same time. So I mean, 12 months out of the year, you would probably have maybe about a sixth of the population gone at one time, and sort of it would be rolling over, so that the community would survive. So they would set things up in such a way that for the 2 months, they would set it up in such a way that my mind can't do the math right now, but in such a way that the community would be able to survive. And so again, with the MITA system, this is compulsory labor to the Incan Empire. And they would, I'll get there in a second, but things such as roads and public works projects, like massive road system that we're going to be talking about, military service, going out and protecting the empire, are all parts of this MITA system. And this is a communal system that everybody between the ages, all men between the ages of 15 and 50 are involved with. And as they are sent out, I would probably say about no more than a third of a community would be out at a time. So 2/3 of the men would be in, and so they would kind of rotate in and out. And when the men were away, the community would help provide food and goods to allow the family without the men to survive. So at the local level, you have agricultural redistribution. At the empire level, you also have, with the Incan economy, it's engaged in agricultural redistribution. Any crops that were not used by individuals or that were not traded, like any crops that were not used by individuals, that is subsistence agriculture, I grow what I need to eat, or traded for goods, were seized is not the right word I want to use, but rather given willingly to the empire itself so that they could set up central storage areas to protect against future bad crops. These crops were not necessarily kept in your own Wamani, kept in your own province, but they could be redistributed throughout the empire. So any crops not used by individuals or traded for goods were redistributed through the empire to central storage sites to protect against future bad crops. So this way, the Incan Empire basically provided a social security net almost for food to protect its people from the possibility of mass starvation. So you have, let's say, an agricultural redistribution site in northern parts of the Incan Empire, and that could be transferred to the south because the south is having a bad crop. Similar, so food and agriculture could go any number of directions, but the Incan Empire is trying to sort of set up a safety net to make sure that there's no mass starvation. So we talked about the Incan government, we talked about the Incan economy with the Mita system and agricultural redistribution. Let's next look at the Incan religion. And there's the man himself, there's the dude himself, Inti, god of the sun. Now, the Incan Empire was a bit like, say, the Roman Empire, in the fact that they incorporated the religious aspects of the people that they conquered and allowed the conquered people to continue to worship in their own manner. So they take over a territory, they would incorporate some of the things that they like and allow the people that they conquered to continue to worship in their own manner. Now, for the Incans, there were three main gods. There was Inti, the sun god. There was Mama Kia, goddess of the moon, and Pachamama, Mother Earth. Now, Inti was the patron saint of the Incans, referred to as god of the sun or the sun god. Therefore, because the Incans claim that they're descendant from Inti, they are the sons, S-O-N-S, of the sun, S-U-N. And so the Incan emperor claimed to descend from Inti and used this claim to justify their rule. So again, we're looking at a polytheistic religion, a religion with multiple gods. And the Incans would allow other religions to be sort of incorporated into their pantheon, but I'm just talking about the main three. So different conquered areas, say in Chan, they might have had different gods. They would be allowed to worship in their own manner, but sort of their gods would kind of be incorporated into the Incan pantheon. Mama Kia, on my left, your right, was the wife and sister of Inti and the goddess of moon and marriage. Sun and the moon very intertwined. As one goes down, the other comes up. Really, it's actually the other way around. As one goes down, because rise in the east, fall in the west, As one goes down, the other comes up. And then we have Pachamama, translated to Mother Earth. Pachamama was a goddess that most of the South American civilizations, in one way, shape, or form, had within their pantheon. Pachamama was the goddess of fertility and goddess of the harvest, and she was most often toasted at the start of meetings and start of gatherings with with a little bit of fermented beverage poured out for her. Literally at the start of every meeting, if we were in person, I would say, "Hey, let's pour one out for Pachamama." The Incan calendar. The Incans had a 12-month calendar with 30 days per month. So again, similar to what we saw with the Aztecs, 360-day year. But the Incans would have a 5-day end of the year feast at the end of November, with the start of the new year, in this case, in December. So their year would run from December to November. Each month would have its own festival. What can we say? The Incans like to party. Each month would have its own festival, with the festival of the sun in June, which still occurs in Peru, and the festival of the dead in November as the major festivals. The festival of the sun, well, that was a 5-day it was a 9-day festival in which it was just a big old party with colorful costumes and parades. The ceremony included animal sacrifices, particularly llama, to help ensure a good harvest. So there is blood sacrifice in the Incan mythos, in the Incan religion, but you don't really find the human sacrifice like you do with the Aztecs. Blood still has power within this religion, but it tended to be animal sacrifices, particularly llamas. For the Festival of the Dead, well, this would occur the entire month of November, the end of the Incan year. And so the festival would celebrate and it would honor familial ancestors and those who would die the previous year. This just popped into my head, but a modern analogy would be, you know how at every Oscar show they would have sort of a, hey, let's look at everybody in entertainment who died the previous year. Picture that, except for the whole entire month of November. Religion sort of relatively straightforward. Again, polytheistic with Inti, Mama Kia, and Pachamama as the major gods and goddesses, willing to incorporate other aspects of religion and allowing the conquered people to continue to worship in their own manner. With the two major festivals, Festival of the Sun and the Festival of the Dead. In that case, let's shift our view to the Incan architecture. And my apologies. One of the rather amazing pieces of architecture in the Incan Empire was their road system. The Incans incorporated and expanded a system of roads throughout the entirety of their empire. And these roads were designed to fit the geography of their location. So going back to a map of the Incan Empire for a second, there are literally road systems going throughout this entire area. And so these roads were designed to fit the geography of its locations. So for roads built in low-lying areas, for example, roads would be built with walls. around it on either side to prevent sand and water from basically coming in and ruining the roads. For roads in the Andes, for roads in the mountains, the Incans, pardon me, created a series of steps to allow for easier climbing. And indeed, up higher grades of elevation, you would have a series of switchbacks where you would go up a little bit, one direction, up a little bit in the next direction, so on and so forth, until you reach the top. So here's an aerial view of an example of a switchback. So starting near the bottom, you would go up one way, another, a little bit of a detour, up, rather than going straight up. I don't know if you've ever been in the Rockies. There are some times when the grade of the elevation is such that you're going, okay, I hope my car makes it up this ridge. Now there are going to be two major north-south roads throughout the empire. There's going to be Kapak Nan, and I'm going to get to the key words to make it easier for y'all. There we are. There's going to be two major north-south roads throughout the empire. Kapak Nan, K-H-A-P-A-C, space N-A-N. That is the Great Inca Road. And Camino Real, the Royal Road. And so one way to think about these two major roads, Kapak Nan and Camino Real, is think of it kind of like Highway 1. Think of it as a Trans-Canada Highway, stretching from one end to the other. That's literally what these roads do. And so you would have these two major roads, Kapak Nan and Camino Real, going north and south. And so you would have roads going east and roads going west that would branch off of these two major thoroughfares, these two main trunk roads. Now these main roads, get back to where we were. Now these two main roads could be as wide as 20 meters and connected all the major administrative centers in the empire, as well as providing reliable routes for not only military movement, but communication between the various levels of government, between the Saya, the Wamani, and the Suyu. The entirety of the road system throughout the Incan Empire made up about 40,000 kilometers of roadway. So we're not talking just minor dirt roads, we're talking a major thoroughfare, a major road system, which the META system needed to continue to upkeep. Now, with respect to Incan architecture, the place that you're probably most familiar with is Machu Picchu. This is likely the most recognizable aspect of Incan architecture that you're familiar with. Machu Picchu was built as an estate for Pachacuti and his family, likely as sort of a summer home in 1450. But it was more or less abandoned after the Spanish takeover. Although it was located only 80 kilometers away from Cusco, the Spanish never found it and never plundered it as they did with other Incan sites. Local vegetation overgrew much of the site and turned it into a lost city of the Incans. And really, I mean, if you think about it, it's built as a summer site for the royal family. And so it kind of makes it a military secret. You don't want people knowing where the emperor is going when he's not in Cusco because it's harder to defend him. And you don't want the emperor attacked. So this your typical Incan would not, at least in the 14 and 1500s, know where Machu Picchu was. It was largely forgotten by the outside world that it's the West until it was, quote, discovered by a man named Hiram Bingham, Hiram Bingham, who was guided there by local farmers in 1911. Basically, he was around Cusco. He was searching for this lost city of the Incans. And basically, an Incan farmer said, "Yeah, I know where it is. It's up the road." I mean, they kind of knew where it was, but it wasn't lost to them. National Geographic would devote an entire issue to Machu Picchu only 2 years later in 1913, which provided a significant boost to its reputation in popular circles. And so from 1913 to the present, Machu Picchu has turned into a significant tourist attraction for Peru, and both Peru and other international organizations have worked at restoring the site. In 1981, Peru declares the site a historical sanctuary, and in 1983, the United Nations, through UNESCO, declares Machu Picchu as a World Heritage Site. Now, the site itself is separated into an upper town, located here, and a lower town. The upper town would contain a majority of the religious temples. So El, for example, located here. So the temple area would be here. We would have the royal tomb, the noble houses, located over here, and the like. So it would contain a majority of the religious temples to the Incan gods, as well as housing a majority of the elite, at least when they were in town. The so-called lower town contained the royal retinue, which is basically the poor people who worked for the royal family, as well as the warehouses. There we are. Machu Picchu was connected to Cusco by a road, today known as the Incan Trail. There is no Cusco railway in the 1450s. But during the Incan Empire, as I said, the location of the site was considered a military secret, and therefore your common Incan did not know about Machu Picchu. So that's sort of a blueprint of what Machu Picchu looks like. I had a friend who went to Machu Picchu last year. This was in February and March of 2019, before all this happened, and she was nice enough to share her pictures. From here, you could tell we have the upper town. We have the lower town located all along here. The Incan Road, again, this is kind of think of a switchback moving up. And here we have a closer view. We would have, this would be the lower town, and the upper town and the lower town separated by a wall. Boom! All right, so we are done with the Incans today. This is probably a bit of a longer video, so I'm going to stop here. Don't forget, annotated bibliography due 2 weeks on Thursday. Feel free to come and talk to me about any questions you might have about any of the lecture material or what you want to do for your research paper. And I'm going to let you guys go forth and slay dragons, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.